Howdy, my name's Brian Foley. I'm a criminal defense lawyer in Conroe, and I represent folks who've been accused of crimes in Houston, Conroe, and the surrounding counties. Welcome back. Today we're going to do installation number 3 of our video series called The Dirty Little Secret, where I go over a specific crime, I tell you a little bit about the crime, and I discuss something that us lawyers know that maybe you and the general public doesn't know. And so here we go. Today's crime is going to be DWI first with a blood test. The thing that people ask me the most about this crime is, can you beat a DWI with a blood test? Isn't that sort of, the last nail in the coffin for the case? If the blood result comes back over 0.08, are we done? And the answer is you can absolutely beat a DWI case even if there is a blood test. The way that that works is a couple different ways. The first thing that you want to do is make sure that things were done properly before they even took the blood. Maybe the reason for the officer pulling you over in the first place is no good. He didn't have a legal basis to begin talking to you in the first place, and then who cares about what the blood number is, because what the judge is going to do is say that that blood alcohol number is what's called fruit of the poisonous tree. The poisonous tree being that illegal arrest or illegal traffic stop. And so if you've got a good legal argument there, then your case is over and we never get to the blood. But there's 100 different ways to attack the blood, and we'll go over that a little bit in this video. One of the most popular ways of attacking a blood test is what we call the disconnect theory. And I've heard this argued many different ways by many different lawyers. Everybody has their own style of arguing this, but the basic argument is this. There's a disconnect between what we see on video with our own eyes, the demeanor of the client, their ability to answer questions logically, quickly. The officer asks, where are you coming from, where have you been? And you rattle off the answers, bing, bing, bing. No problems. Well, then he asked you to do these field sobriety tests that are not really a natural walking style, things like that, and there's some difficulty there, but basically the client makes it through the tests. And then the blood result comes back and it's something like 2 or 3 times the legal limit. And there's a disconnect between what you would expect to see, and there's a chart for motor performance on alcohol consumption called the Dubowski chart, which is a scientifically verified study that says, somebody who's 2 or 3 times the legal limit, they should have maybe respiratory failure. And what you're seeing on video is just somebody who is pretty normal. They've got most of their normal mental and physical faculties. And so you combine that with a number of other attacks on the blood testing and the sample validity, the way that it was refrigerated, things like that. And it becomes pretty quick when you're looking for that not guilty verdict. They can come back, I've seen a not guilty verdict in 10, 15 minutes on a blood test where it was a really high blood test, something in the 0.221 or something like that. It happens all the time. So that is the disconnect theory, and that's another way that you can beat your DWI blood case. Well, the officer will read you the DIC-24, and he will go over your options there, what's going to happen to your license. It's going to be suspended if you refuse. And then if you consent, then he's going to take you to a phlebotomist. That's a person who draws blood, either at a hospital or at a jail facility where they're employed. In Montgomery County, they have one every Friday and Saturday night. They have them up at the jail. And in Harris County, they have them pretty much every day. So then what are they going to do? Well, they're going to take one of these handy-dandy blood kits. Now, my blood kit here is a little bit older, and so it's only got 1 vial, but yours is definitely going to have 2 vials. For a long time now, they've been using 2 different blood vials, but they're going to have one of these. It's a forensic blood testing tube. It's got a gray top to it, and it has potassium oxalate and sodium fluoride, and those are this little white powder at the bottom, and that is meant to preserve the blood sample and keep it from clotting. So if this tube doesn't fill up all the way, there's a chance that the seal at the top has been compromised, which could lead to a bad test result. If there is no white powdery residue in there, the potassium oxalate sodium fluoride, then perhaps the sample is not going to be preserved correctly. Maybe there's clotting that is going to affect the sample, and there's all sorts of ways to attack that. And that's just on the blood test tube itself. So we go over all those things when we're looking at your case, and we determine the best course of action. Once you've got a lawyer who can take a look at the evidence, attack the traffic stop, attack the way that the blood sample was obtained, then you can move on to how the blood was actually tested. When the blood goes to the Department of Public Safety lab in Houston, I know that it gets tested in what's called a gas chromatograph. And they're not actually testing your blood. They're testing the air that is above your blood inside a tube.
As you can see from this picture, there's a number of different types of blood tubes available for a nurse to try to draw your blood. The gray top tube is the proper one for a forensic draw related to a DWI investigation. Sometimes a prosecutor will try to enter in a hospital blood result. This is normally not sufficient on its own because hospitals test serum blood by sending the blood through a centrifuge and extracting out waste material and blood cells. This gives an inflated number to alcohol content, and the number needs to be converted to what they call whole blood. As you can see in this second picture, we have two different test tubes. This would represent the alcohol content in the air above a blood sample, and then the blue part on the bottom would be your blood. The red dots would be the amount of alcohol. This graph illustrates what's called Henry's Law. It's a scientific principle that allows blood testing to occur by sampling the air above a blood sample instead of the liquid itself. In this final drawing, we have a headspace gas chromatograph. We can see the sample vial that we saw in the previous picture going through a transfer line, down an inlet, and through a column. When the alcohol and other substances flow through the column, they are accelerated, and different substances take different amounts of time to pass through the column and then finally pass the flame detector at the end of the assembly line here. So the DPS analysts or Houston PD analysts or whoever is sampling and testing the blood, they are calibrating the machine to say that, well, if alcohol comes out after 3 seconds of going through the column, then they'll say how much of any one particular substance came out of the column at the 3-second mark.
Now, if it's tested at the Department of Public Safety lab in Houston, then your blood sample is going to get thrown in with about 50 other people's and tested at the same time. The instruments there sometimes have errors called carryover, where alcohol is residually left in the reading instrument, and sometimes that can inflate the alcohol numbers. There's 100 different ways to attack a blood test, and this video would probably be about 3 days long if we went over all of them. But the best thing you can do is hire a lawyer quickly so they can get started on your case. What is the punishment for a DWI with a blood test in Texas? Well, it depends on the result of your blood sample. If it's between 0.08 and 0.15, then it is a Class B, 180 days in jail, and a $2,000 fine is the maximum punishment. And if it is above a 0.15 or it is a 0.15 on the button, then that is going to be a Class A misdemeanor with a maximum of 1 year in jail and a $4,000 fine. So what is the dirty little secret with blood tests in Texas? The dirty little secret there is that these are probably, and I think you can see just from this video, these are probably the most complicated cases from a scientific and evidentiary viewpoint that we have. Really, I've tried murder cases, I have tried many DWIs, and the more scientifically and trial advocacy related challenging cases, they're definitely the DWIs. And the dirty little secret is that the most inexperienced prosecutors are the ones generally left handling these cases. And so if you've hired an experienced criminal defense lawyer, the odds of having a greater number of trials under their belt and being more prepared to win a case in front of a jury, your defense attorney is going to be much more comfortable in trial than the prosecutor who's handling the case. In Harris County, they may have had no trials, maybe up to like 4 or 5 with the amount of turnover that's been over there. In Montgomery County, they're probably going to have a little more experience, but again, they're not going to be, you're not going to have a prosecutor who's been doing this for 20 years coming down and trying a DWI first with a blood test. It's just not going to happen. And so that gives you a great advantage when you hire a competent defense attorney to help handle your case.